Secretary of Treasury.
Secretary of Treasury.
Deals with money.
Deals with money.
Secretary.
Hi, and welcome back to Mr. Raymond's Civics EOC Academy, where today is our last section of test prep for your big state exam, as we're going to look at the organization and function of government, or how government is set up and what jobs and responsibilities they have. The first thing you need to know is different forms of government. This will explain who holds power in these governments and how they operate. The first two forms of government are familiar to Americans: direct democracy and representative democracy. Remember, democracy means the people are in charge. Democracy means voting. Direct democracy is where all of the people make the decisions for the state. And while we don't have a direct democracy form of government, we do have aspects in our representative democracy. Some states let people vote on amendments, and some towns let the people vote on laws. What America has is a representative democracy, or a republic, which means we vote on representatives to pass laws and make decisions for us. And representative democracies are a popular form of government throughout the world. Socialism and communism are very much tied together. Both forms sought to fix the imbalance between the rich business owners and the working masses. Both involve public ownership of business, which means the government owns and runs some businesses. For socialism, this might mean free healthcare and education run by the state, and the communist forms of government that developed took a more extreme approach to this idea, taking control of all businesses and private property. The idea was everything would be shared, but it didn't really work out that way. If you have a test question about the rights of workers or the government controlling business, your answer is either socialism or communism, and just think of communism as being the more extreme version of the two. Monarchies are ruled by kings or queens. Absolute monarchies were big in the Middle Ages, where a king or queen had absolute power to pass and enforce laws and run the state. One of the few absolute monarchies left is Saudi Arabia, and this is the one the state seems to use as an example. Most monarchies that are left are constitutional monarchies, like Great Britain, which has a king or a queen, but they are mostly just ceremonial figureheads without any power to rule. Two other words you need to know that describe forms of government are oligarchy, which is ruled by a few, and autocracy, which is ruled by one. And these words can describe how the different forms operate. Your next question: what are systems of government? Systems of government describe how power flows between the different levels of government. For instance, America has a federal system of government in which power is shared between the national or central government and state or regional governments. Look for arrows explaining the direction power flows. In a confederal system, which America had during the Articles of Confederation, the states or regional governments had all of the power, and they tell the national or central government what to do. There aren't many confederal systems left, but there are a few. In a unitary system like they have in Great Britain, the national or central government has all of the power, usually because there aren't any state or regional governments, just local ones, that the national government delegates powers to. A parliamentary system of government isn't about levels of government, but about branches. In a parliamentary system, the executive, often called the prime minister, is chosen by the legislative branch, often called parliament. This is different from our presidential system, in which the people vote for the legislative branch, but they also choose the executive or president. So what do you need to know about the three branches? Well, first and foremost, you need to know their jobs. The legislative, our national one, is called Congress, which makes laws. The executive, the president or governor, enforces the law. The judicial, headed by the Supreme Court, interprets the law. Most of your test questions will be about the powers. You need to know the enumerated powers of Congress. And remember, enumerated means they are listed in the Constitution. Congress has the power to tax, regulate commerce or trade, coin money, approve presidential appointments, impeach or remove from office the president or judges, support the Army and Navy, declare war, make the rules of naturalization and immigration, confirm treaties, and make all, quote, necessary and proper laws, which we call the Elastic Clause. The executive enforces the law. They are the commander-in-chief. They sign treaties, appoint judges and department heads, and can call Congress into special session. Remember, the executive also recommends laws and appoints ambassadors. Hopefully you remember that the Constitution wasn't very specific about the judicial branch. It stated that there would be one Supreme Court and that Congress could make, quote, inferior courts. It said that judges would serve for life as long as they maintain, quote, good behavior, and that judges would be appointed by the president and confirmed by the Senate. It also said that the Supreme Court would have original jurisdiction, or the power to hear court cases first, for those involving ambassadors or representatives from other countries, maritime issues or those that take place at sea, and cases involving two or more states. Otherwise, the Supreme Court has what's known as appellate jurisdiction, cases that have been appealed to the highest court. Again, it took the case of Marbury versus Madison to establish the main power of the Supreme Court, judicial review, or the power to declare a law unconstitutional. What are the different levels of courts? The federal court system and the various state court systems are similar in that they both have 3 levels. At the bottom in Florida, like most other states, you have county or circuit courts where the trial starts. And this is the same for U.S. district courts. This is the level where you have juries and witnesses, where most cases start and end. Above this level, you have courts of appeals that have appellate jurisdiction, where small panels of judges will decide if the defendant had a fair trial the first time. If a defendant loses on appeal, they might convince the Supreme Court to hear their case, although this is very rare. The only difference between the two systems of courts is that if a defendant loses at the state Supreme Court, they can appeal to the U.S. Supreme Court, but it can't go back the other way. So how do national and state governments share power? Our system of sharing power between national and state governments, again, is called federalism, from our federal system of government. Your state exam might show you a Venn diagram, like the one we see here, to compare state and federal powers or responsibilities. In one portion, you will see enumerated/delegated powers to describe the national or federal powers. In the middle, the shared portion are called concurrent powers. And in the other portion are the reserved or state powers. The national enumerated/delegated powers include maintaining the military and declaring war, the U.S. Postal Service, regulating interstate and foreign trade, and coining money. As you know, there are a lot more, but these are the examples most often provided in this chart. For concurrent powers, both levels of government can tax, they can provide for the public welfare, establish courts, borrow money, and build highways. For state powers, remember, we get the name reserved powers for the states from the 10th Amendment, which says that all powers not delegated to the national government are reserved for the states. And these include establishing local governments, intra-state trade, which is trade within the state boundaries, elections, public safety, marriage, and driver's licenses. I've seen practice tests where they will give you this exact chart and ask you what the title of the chart should be, and the answer is federalism. How are national amendments passed? For federal amendments or national amendments, it requires a 2/3 vote of both houses of Congress and 3/4 of state legislatures or conventions. Remember, 2/3 of Congress, 3/4 of the states. We'll look at state amendments in a minute, but this is how you make national amendments. How are laws passed? The lawmaking process at the national and state levels are very similar. First, an idea for a bill, again, a bill is a proposed law, can be suggested by anyone, but a member of Congress must officially sponsor or initiate that bill, and they can do that in either house. The bill is then sent to committee, where most bills die or get passed on. Next, they are sent to the floor of the House or the Senate for debate and amendments, and then they are voted on. If they've made it that far, they are sent to the other house, where the process starts all over. Committee, debate, and amendments, vote, And after it's gone through both houses, it gets sent to a conference committee to make sure the two versions of the bill match up. After that, they are sent to the president, who can either sign the bill, making it law, or veto the bill, in which it gets sent back to Congress. Now, Congress can override the president's veto with a 2/3 vote, but this is pretty rare. How do the U.S. and Florida constitutions compare? For starters, they both begin with very similar preambles, starting with those three famous words, "We the people." The U.S. Constitution is much shorter. It has 7 articles to the Florida's 12. They both protect people's rights, the U.S. with the Bill of Rights added to it, and the Florida contains the Declaration of Rights at the beginning. This has many of the same rights, including the 5 freedoms, the right to bear arms, but including a longer list of rights. The Florida also has way more amendments that are very specific, dealing with day-to-day issues, including education, motor vehicles, and elections. The Florida Constitution also includes several ways to pass amendments, including an initiative where people can gather signatures and then vote on whether an amendment will pass. There is a Constitutional Revision Commission that meets every 20 years to suggest amendments or changes to the state constitution. The state legislature can pass amendments known as joint resolutions by a 3/5 vote of both houses. So unlike the U.S. Constitution, there are many ways to amend the Florida Constitution, and way more amendments get passed. And finally, you have to know what services are provided by which level of government. We looked at this a little before. For the federal government, think big things like disaster relief, environmental issues that affect the whole country, not just locally, keeping our foods and medicines safe, large welfare programs like Social Security and Medicaid, the Postal Service, and interstate highways. For states, you want to think education programs, state environmental issues, driver's licenses, and licenses for businesses and certain professions like my Florida teacher's license, state highways, state police, and public safety programs. For local, it's local police, fire departments, libraries, schools, local roads, and trash collection. Here's a look at those national programs and state programs and local programs. And that is it, my friends. What a year. I just want to wish you all the best of luck on your exam. Just a reminder, teachers, that this PowerPoint with 2 practice tests, a study guide, and other resources are available at Teachers Pay Teachers. Just search for Mr. Raymond's Civics EOC Academy. And again, guys, thanks for watching these. The best of luck. I know you're going to ace that exam.